Days after the Canada Security Intelligence Service alleged that India attempted to interfere in the Canadian elections that took place in 2019 and 2021, a panel of senior Canadian officials have now completely rejected these charges. It said that there was no Indian interference in Canadian politics. A probe panel monitoring the 2021 election said that India did not use any tool to influence Canada's national polls. Listen into this public inquiry where the panel refuted these allegations.
A generalized briefing about the possibilities or potential of a threat.
That's right. Because
to reframe my question, I'm asking if the panel considered specific instances or threats constituted by Indian disinformation.
Not during the writ period.
Thank you.
Because there was no information suggesting that there was disinformation or originating from that source in the Canadian information ecosphere during that period.
Earlier, remember, India had refuted the claims and assured its commitment to non-interference in other nations' democratic processes. Remember, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party won both the elections held in 2019 and 21. He is, in fact, going to be deposing in front of this probe panel today.
Obviously, the question of foreign interference is one that is extremely important, and that's why, as a government, we put in place significant measures to ensure that, for example, our elections continue to be free and fair, despite what we have known for years is ongoing attempts at interference by various foreign actors.
Now, interestingly, Canada's intelligence service has confirmed China's interference in Canadian elections, stating that China clandestinely and deceptively interfered in both the elections. The question is, when will Canada stop making such wild allegations against India and get embarrassed again and again? And how will this impact the already strained ties between India and Canada? Joining me on the broadcast first is Dean Baxendale. He's a Canadian journalist. He's also an author, and in fact, he is keeping a close eye on this probe panel that is holding a public inquiry in Canada regarding the kind of allegations that have been made. Dean, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on Mirror Now. First of all, Dean, these allegations are absolutely wild. The probe panel has completely rejected any Indian influence in Canada's politics. Your first thoughts?
Well, I think we must look at governments globally, and both soft power and sharp power diplomacy, wherever they might have engagement with countries like Canada. I think that certainly the Indian government tries and attempts to influence our politicians and to talk about positive relationships, obviously, with India and Canada, i.e. trade, commerce, the development of intellectual property, opportunities for expansion for both economies. And obviously we share, a significant, we have one of the largest diaspora Indian communities in the world. Outside of India in Canada. So it's very important for us to continue to have relationships. I think at times that the Indian government has certainly engaged with individuals and groups inside Canada to potentially influence our political positions. Yes, but I think all governments do that. And that is fair. What we're talking about, though, more so is the malign state interference that we've seen arise in democracies, specifically being sponsored either directly by the Chinese Communist Party, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and other totalitarian states that aim to destabilize democracies and ultimately create havoc within our various states.
Which is what leads me to my next question, Dean. Why make such allegations in the first place when there is no evidence to prove that?
Are we specifically talking about the? So people within the Indian community, there are a number of Canadian politicians there certainly have expressed, liberal politicians have certainly expressed this sentiment that they feel that the Indian government, as well as the Pakistani government, has tried to interfere in our diasporic communities over the past few decades. So those allegations come often from within the Indian diasporic communities here in the country. And certainly, you know, when we look at others, like the Chinese diaspora community, they have certainly made it very clear to CSIS and the RCMP that the Chinese Communist Party itself has had malign intentions of oppressing and suppressing their voices here in Canada.
Which is, which has been actually confirmed by your own intelligence, Dean, the fact that there was no Indian interference, but there was certainly Chinese interference and Chinese influence in both the elections.
Well, of course, this is the subject of Judge Hoag's, inquiry on election interference here in the country. And yesterday we had 4 key officials of the Prime Minister's office, also referred commonly as the PMO, who testified that they were briefed by CSIS intelligence, and in some cases chose not to accept that intelligence. And in the case of the former chair of the election committee, he decided that he was not going to inform the Prime Minister that an MP, now sitting as an independent hand-on, was indeed his nomination meeting was ultimately sponsored by the PRC, busing in students from another riding altogether and voting for him. So the level of, we'll just say, breaking of party rules, breaking of democratic norms in terms of running a duly sanctioned nomination process seems to undermine our democracy right from the outset. So if we're putting in pro-PRC candidates running as liberals, what are we to think if we are citizens inside our country in terms of understanding how that individual may vote in Parliament or may try to influence people within his own party about policies towards China itself?
Dean, many observers also feel that these kind of allegations that are made against India by Trudeau and his government have a lot to do with the tactics that are being employed by Justin Trudeau to distract his critics from the kind of domestic pressure that he's facing.
So I wrote in my column in the Sunday Guardian last year when this first came about that the allegations that the Prime Minister brought forward in the Parliament vis-a-vis the murder in Canada of the Sikh activist, certainly classified in India as a separatist individual, that the Prime Minister leveraged it at the time to suggest that he was being tough on foreign interference. As we now know, there seems to be some evidence that that individual and who ultimately murdered him, there may be some links to the Indian government for that, as you have read and ascertained from the FBI reporting. But that is no way in which to leverage a situation openly in Parliament against an ally that is India.
Okay, my last question to you, Dean, then. It's scary actually to have a foreign interference, a foreign influence in your national elections. How is Canada going to strategize this further? How is it going to cope with this kind of foreign interference where your intelligence has confirmed of Chinese influence?
So this is an ongoing process right now here in Canada. First of all, I think we have, I've been involved with publishing about 6 or 7 books specifically on malign state and influence operations, transnational oppression against Tibetans, Uyghurs, the Falun Gong, Taiwan and Hong Kong, as well as bringing forward intelligence narratives that suggest that the PRC's global hegemonic strategy is pervasive inside Canada. The awareness of the population of Canadian citizens has been elevated, but are the people inside the Ottawa bubble ready to take action? I think we're still a little ways away from that, but what we are hoping out of the Hogue inquiry is that she makes solid recommendations to do further investigation and a further study of the overall and overarching infiltration operations by foreign governments, malign foreign governments like the Chinese Communist Party, Russia, Iran, inside Canada, because they are uprooting our democracy. They are engaged with criminal activities here in our country and destabilizing our democracy.
All right. All right, we'll leave it there. Dean Baxendale, thank you very much for joining us on Nation Tonight and helping us understand what exactly is going on in Canada. Let me also welcome Chirayu Thakkar, foreign policy expert on the broadcast. Chirayu Thakkar, thank you very much for joining us on Mirror Now. This is bizarre. Canada would just throw in some wild allegation into the air against India, and then their own panel would come and say that, you know what, this is not true, and India has no role whatsoever in Canada's national politics. In fact, as we speak, Chirayu, the Election Interference Commission is holding that public inquiry in Ottawa. So clearly, I mean, the India-Canada ties are already strained. Why would you throw in another wild allegation such as this?
Good evening, Shreya. Thank you for having me. I think what Justin Trudeau has exhibited in last 1 year is reckless brinkmanship to save his own sinking domestic ship, and I think there is a good amount of chance that this would do considerable damage to India-Canada ties. It has already been done, and it would take very long time for the next administration, whenever it comes to Ottawa, to repair these ties. Now you look, there were no clear, credible allegations against India. Forget the entire previous episode, but of the assassination. But in this specific case, there was no allegations, no finger pointing at India, and all of a sudden, Justin Trudeau, who considers India as a friend and ally, he has made numerous statements saying that he wants good ties, he wants to dial down tensions, and all of a sudden he throws India into the mix with China and Russia, both whom the West considers malignant actors, in the January inquiry period, and says that India should also be investigated. And today you see nothing comes out of this. Then why, in fact, name India in such an inquiry in the first place? And I have said this numerous times, I have written this in my columns. The first and the most important thing is there is a considerable amount of Indian diaspora. If some of them, they don't like Narendra Modi for religious reason, for separatist reason, there is also a nationalistic diaspora. So if you take a position vis-a-vis India, you are going to appease a lot of the people who don't like the current dispensation in New Delhi, but you are also going to offend the sensibilities who like the current dispensation and its nationalistic policies. So, without even
Let
India
me
doing
understand from you
anything,
then.
section,
What
yeah.
voter base is Trudeau catering to? With these kind of allegations, we know that Canada also has Khalistani thugs operating from its soil. But what kind of voter base is Trudeau then catering to when he makes such allegations? And does it have an impact on ground?
Will it have impact this time around? I think we are still a few months, or like I think it's next year, so we'll have to wait and see until the Canadian elections actually happen. uh, because you also have to see that the voter is not a single issue voter like in India, like in any part of the world. And based on the information that we read from newspapers, based on what we hear from our friends in Canada, the cost of living situation, the housing crisis, this all things are considerably worse under Trudeau. So I don't know, even if he's trying to please a certain section of Sikh community, or he is trying to please his liberal community, whatever he is trying to do, it won't be a single issue election, and people, it's not exactly sure they're going to vote for Trudeau just only because of that, because they are also feeling the heat of his other policies. And therefore, it remains to be seen whether this pays off or not.
Okay, then my last question to you, Chirayu. Already Chinese interference has been confirmed in Canadian elections, in Canadian politics. Their own intelligence service has confirmed it. But recently there was also a report by Microsoft which said that, China can interfere in the upcoming Indian elections as well. China clearly spreading its vicious tentacles across the world, but how should countries then be gearing up for it? It's dangerous.
Countries are serious about Chinese threat, they shouldn't be politicizing and taking lightly and throwing a lot of actors that they don't like. For example, what was happening in Canada, you see very clearly the Chinese government was actually paying. This is again allegations that up to the tune of $250,000 through direct indirect sources. They were, creating a favorable environment. In fact, one of the candidates who is under scrutiny, he was telling the Chinese government via its diplomat that don't release the two Michaels. They were imprisoned by the Communist Party just because that will help the conservatives. This is a serious level of
Yeah.
meddling. Now, if you are going to trivialize this level of meddling by saying, oh, India might also be influencing his diaspora, Pakistan might be doing, X country might be doing, you are actually, diminishing the gravity of China's actions. So, first of all, if you want to really
Right.
take the threat to elections seriously, do not undermine what China is doing around the world. That is first aspect of it. The second aspect of is, from voters onwards, everybody has to remain vigilant. The government has to remain vigilant. The tech giants have to remain vigilant, and we have to see that the more people see the unreliability of China, the governments around the world, and the more they see the transactional element, the coercive element in China's diplomacy, the more they
Yeah.
are unwilling to trust. And under those
I think in
circumstances,
all
if China
aspects, Chirayu,
loses
we
the
have to be aware and be alert, especially when it comes to our social media handles. We'll have to be very, very alert on what's happening there and the kind of narrative that is going on there. I'll leave it there. I have paucity of time, Chirayu, but thank you very much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your thoughts and helping us understand more in this.